Hello, all, and welcome to History with R&R Live. How are you doing, Jeff?
Doing pretty well. It's good to be here.
And since I'm not doing the major reveal, our guest today is Stone Loki, who is
How are you
probably
guys
ready to
doing?
take his computer and hit it with the biggest hammer he can find. But anyway,
No, Sparta's too. No, I love Sparta. I never do that to Sparta.
well, maybe the designers or the person who built it, they
Yeah.
might have an interview with a hammer. But
That might be more appropriate.
yes. All right, taking a quick spin through the chat if my computer will let me. We have Archer Colin. We have Zax, who is frozen and under snow like I am, and in a couple of months will be underwater, but that's okay. And John DeMarco, welcome. Who else do we have? Mrs. Canuck, welcome. Hopefully your afternoon is better than your morning was. And who else do we have here? East Burkholder, ICU, welcome. Hopefully, hopefully you all find this stream a little bit informative and catch it while you can, because in all likelihood we're talking World War II, so that means we're going to get nailed for hate speech. So watch it while you can, folks. It may disappear.
Always fun around here.
Yeah. All right. So Loki, I will put the floor to you, and you can lead us in the direction you wish to go, and we'll go from there.
Well, if we're talking wonder weapons today,
Yes.
World War II Wunder weapons, you got to start out with the Sonogram Sun Gun. Okay, this was supposed to be like a satellite that redirected the sun to hit like a laser beam. So it was designed to focus sunlight and hit a location using light. I mean, you're talking about the 40s. We're not talking about now. We're not talking about, oh well, we have new proton gun in orbit. El Mabarasha. No, we're talking about Germany in the 40s putting something in orbit, a satellite that could redirect sunlight back down to the earth. That's insane. That's insanity for the 40s.
Yeah, the people would be thinking of these kind of things at that point. Yeah. Luckily for us, they never put any of this into practice, but
no, they wanted to. I mean, can you imagine that? Hail the Führer! We have new satellite bombardment weapon. I can't imagine that the angry German with the mustache would not have been like, no, absolutely, thumbs up.
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
I need a new button on my panel.
I need a new button on my chair, on my my evil villain chair.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we often think, like, when we look back, we go, well, they were probably thinking of, new tanks, new planes. One of the drawings was for like a fighter jet, that, like, a bomber that would be like suborbital bomber.
Yes.
The jet. Yeah.
They wanted to send those to the U.S. They wanted.
Well, they could have attacked anywhere. That was the point.
Yeah.
But like we don't really look and go just how much they were looking at things, and they were really willing to try anything.
Oh yeah.
As long as they were willing to. You can say what you want about their ideals or their theories, but they truly were willing to try just about anything, and nothing was like, you're from outer space. You lay off the coke, okay? This is, like they never had that moment where it was like, you want to design what? A missile that will attack London. Get out of here. I was like, really? Come tell us about that. It was, like like. Whereas the Allies were like, yeah, no, we're not funding that. Go away. They were a little bit more. They were a little bit more
modest in their approach.
Yeah, they were a little bit more open to. Well, that sounds crazy, but can you make it work?
Did you ever hear about the Zeppelin rammer?
Maybe, but maybe
It
under
was
a different name.
it was a Zeppelin with rockets, okay, with rockets attached to it that would propel it forward, so you could ram the Zeppelin against a target.
Oh, fun.
No, I
Hmm.
mean that's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. I mean, you're already in an aircraft full of flammable gas. Why not just shoot a rocket out of its ass? We'll tie an Acme rocket to it, and we'll launch it against the target, and we'll ram them with it.
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
Well, I mean,
Whatever
like,
works, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can expand this to even like some of the secret projects of World War II, both Allied, German, Japanese, because they had a few of them too, are just we sit there and we go, they were going to do what? Like you look at the Allies had, it was basically a torpedo. Two men got on said torpedo and then went underwater with scuba gear, and then they went and attached a whole bunch of TNT to the bottom of a ship and then used this thing to get away. And then the Japanese did one better and just said, "Well, we'll just take away the whole getaway part, because we can fit more TNT into this torpedo with a man in it to aim it, and we'll just not worry about the getaway part." Uh,
And they didn't just do that with the torpedoes. They were looking at missiles,
yeah,
doing that with missiles. Okay, you load a guy into a missile, and basically it was a suicide cruise missile, and that was called the Fleiser. I think it was the 103 Reichenberg, which was basically a cruise missile with the dude in it, and there was
yeah.
no way out. This was a one-way trip.
Well,
But
and what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of the stuff that was done in World War II, um, we know today, but under a different name. Cruise missile, for instance. That was the V2.
yeah,
It had its beginnings in the V2. Um, smart bombs. Fritz X, anybody? You know, different name, different country. The
the
Fritz
A-12.
X was one of the first smart bombs.
The A-12, if you look up the description for the German A-12, it's planned four-stage orbital launch rocket capable of putting 10 metric tons into low Earth orbit. What does that sound like?
Yeah, the modern IBM, yeah.
So,
But a lot of modern day stuff that we look at today as, cutting edge modern technology really isn't all that modern if you stop and look at it. It's just we've finally been able to do it. That's the difference.
yeah,
But the idea it goes back so much further
Mm-hmm.
than what we give it credit for. It didn't just, the modern cruise missile didn't just come about in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s. It was back in the 30s, 40s that they were looking at this and designing and trying to come up with a way to make it work. They just could never get it to work.
yeah, now it's all about cheaper. It has to be cheaper. It has to be less expensive. We're not going to throw the money in it that we used to throw in it, so it's got to be cheap. And when you're dealing with cheap, you're dealing with shortcuts, and shortcuts don't work, especially if you want to put something in orbit.
Yes. And or
Even that's getting cheaper, though.
Yeah, and more available to the public. Obviously, we just saw William Shatner go up into space.
yep. Whereas that was a pipe dream at one point, or held for the very top. Although like everything, and this is kind of going off of our topic, but how many astronauts right now are pissed off? If you stop and think about it, right? Your average Joe can now go into space, and they had to
Well,
train for their entire life just to do the same thing.
The biggest problem with all of that is you're taking a nuclear physicist, and that's the qualification you want for someone to go up into space and turn a wrench.
Yeah.
You don't need that. You need a guy
No.
that can go up in space and turn a wrench.
Yeah.
You don't need a guy with 12 different doctorates to go into space. You need workers that can go into space. That's what you need. And NASA took the exact opposite
Yes.
approach. Instead of we need this guy, we need to train him how to do this, and this is what his job needs to be. Instead, you've got people with 4 different doctorates going, "Oh yes, I will learn how to work in a pool that's going to simulate space, so I can go up and turn a wrench on a satellite in space. Let
Yeah.
me pull this circuit board out and replace it, and guess what? My 4-hour job that I trained my whole life for is done."
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, the problem with that is, Loki, if you just train a guy who knows how to turn a wrench to go in, you send him up, he turns the wrench, he comes back. Well, you can't waste money that way. You don't need $60 million from the government if that's all you're going to do. You need to explain the budgets so that, I can get my yacht next week. Yeah, stuff like that.
I mean, how many people would go to work for a company like NASA? Let's say you make $50,000 a year and go up into space. How many people would do that? Raise your hand if you're down to go into space. Raise your hand. I know my hand's up. I'm ready.
Yeah.
But no, you have to have 9 different kind of. Now I understand that like, okay, well you get an Air Force guy in to pilot the damn thing. Okay, you have a mission commander that knows everything possible that could go wrong, everything. But the guy that's working on equipment, that doesn't need you don't need to have 5 different doctorates for that. You just need to know how to work on the equipment and fix the equipment. There's a reason why satellites are falling out of the sky all the time. It's because we have a junkyard up there of shit that we can't go up and fix easily.
No.
Yeah, that's very
or cheaply. True. It's just cheaper to let it fall out of the sky, which is another total problem. But going back to original topic of the day, wonder weapons, and I think we could even branch off because it's not just German wonder weapons, which were amazing in thought. They didn't get a lot of them done, but heaven help us if they did. But a lot of them did. A lot of them did see the light of day.
Jets. Yeah, Messerschmitt just came too late. It just came too late. That was the and
not enough numbers.
Not enough numbers. And if they'd have devoted themselves, really, if they'd have devoted themselves to one project instead of, well, we want this. The angry German with the mustache was notorious for going, oh, yes, do this. And 3 minutes later going, it's taking too much time and too much money. Let's focus on this.
Yeah.
Dude, you just stay focused on what you're trying to build and build it. And instead,
well, you can look at it just in the premise of, and again, this is my non-learned opinion, but if you think about it, you can break it down into more basic things. You look at the Allies. The Allies had the Sherman Tank for most of World War II. There were a few others, but the main production was a Sherman. Okay?
Not a technological marvel.
No. By no stretch of the imagination. The Russians had DT-34.
Oh, what a giant hunk of metal.
Okay.
You
Which,
put treads on a
um,
brick.
yeah,
Is what you did. And the engine, you'd get like, 200 miles out of the engine, and then that's it.
right. The thing wasn't a thing of beauty or a, masterpiece, but it got the job done. And they produced it in enough numbers because they settled on we're going with the T-34. We're going with the Sherman. Okay. So we're going to mass produce the Sherman. We're going to make it so the Sherman is easy to work on. We're going to make it so that, the Sherman was this big tank with a way too high profile. But instead of going, okay, well, we're going to have 16 different tanks, we're going to have the one, whereas the Sherman. That's what you're going into battle with. And if we lose 5, that's okay. We have 10. That was the mentality. We're going to lose 5, but we have 10, so it's all good. Whereas if you look on the opposite side, I maintain that if they would have stuck with a Panzer III, Panzer IV, that's it. You get to Panzer III, Panzer IV, because the Panzer I was way undergunned and way under armored, and the Panzer II, no. So if they would have stuck with Panzer III, Panzer IV, forget everything else, and just mass produced the hell out of the Panzer III, Panzer IV, it would have been a different war.
Yeah, different ballgame. We had parts. We had parts for days. And that was the hard thing. How much logistics do you have to get parts over the ocean into the battlefield?
Yeah.
Well, if we bring all of our shit, as much shit as we can possibly bring with us, and get it there in the field to the guys that need it, and it's only one tank. That's all we have to worry about is that one tank. All we have to worry about is getting parts there.
Yeah.
For that one tank. We don't need parts for this. We don't mislabeled this. Oh, well, I ordered new treads and I got fucking cookware.
Yeah.
It was, this is it. This is what's going. This is what you're going to get. And that was it. Germany had what, 15 different tanks by the end of the war?
Yeah. Well, and not only that, but complicated.
Yeah, complicated.
Right? If the Sherman needed fixed, it was down for a couple hours and back on the battlefield. If a Tiger's engine had problems, well, better get a mechanic, and a good one, because this is going to take a couple minutes. They were hard to work on. They were over complex for what they needed to be. But I mean, on the premise of it, a Tiger tank is everything you want on the battlefield. It had armor for days, a gun that could take out anything that was within 50 feet of it. Well, I'm shortchanging it, but you get what I mean. It was what you wanted. Problem was it was overcomplicated and heavy.
Yep.
Right.
You hit it. You have your Tiger. Okay, cool. Now we got to the bridge. We need to go over that bridge. The problem is the bridge doesn't support the weight of the tank. Hello, elephant.
Well, and then again, you get into the exact same conversation we were having just a minute ago about a certain angry mustache German that loved bigger. Bigger is better. Everything has to be bigger. Everything has to be louder. Everything has to be grander. I want my tank over here to absolutely dwarf your little American tank over here. I want, when you see my tank in battle, I want you to be scared crapless. The problem was if the engine wasn't working, guess what? That thing's sitting there. It ain't moving. So any kind of mobility you need, it's gone.
Yep.
You might have a bigger gun, you might have better armor, but if it ain't moving, then you're just gonna get a shellacking because it's just gonna sit there while we pound you for days and days and days.
Yeah. Well, it's not only that, but if you think about it this way, if you're on a battlefield and you have one guy who's like back in the days of swords and shields and stuff, if you have one guy who's really good swordsman and he's trained and he's, he can take out 5 guys by himself. That's great. The problem is he's got 20 guys coming at him who are just, they picked up the sword yesterday. That doesn't matter. There's still 20 to 1. Problem. Right? And that was the issue. There wasn't enough because you'd have different factory lines, whereas once the Allies decided, okay, we're doing this, and then they just mass produced that one thing, whether it was good or not. I mean, people to this day will argue whether the Sherman was worth a darn or should have never seen the battlefield. There are people on both sides of that argument. And that argument will rage until the end of time. The difference is it got the job done.
Right.
T-34, right. Another example, got the job done.
And
it wasn't the prettiest tank.
It was, and that was heavy too. But the Russians did something absolutely insane. The way the armor on the outside of the tank curved and was slated, it would deflect shells more than half the time. If it got hit by an enemy tank, the shell would deflect off the armor and out. That means it wasn't hitting the tank.
Yeah,
it was deflecting off the armor. That right there will save your life. That will save the tank's life. You get to live to fight another day. And when you have an army of them running at you, even if they can only get 200 miles, that poses a problem for the Germans.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but the other thing the Russians did that somebody forgot to inform, the invading army, was that they get snow, and wide tracks work well on snow. Narrow tracks do not.
But that was one of the biggest mistakes of World War II, was going into Russia in the winter. Oh, we'll be fine. No.
Yeah. Well, they went in the spring, early summer, and then, oh, wait. You mean this isn't, we're not going to have this done in 4 months? Oh, darn.
And there was a big push by the angry mustache man I want Stalingrad captured. I want it captured. I want all of Russia done. I want this over. We'll blitzkrieg it, and I want it over. And that's not what happened.
No. And I mean, now we look back and we see it, and it's always good to sit there with hindsight. Like we look at it now, and it's like, they wanted to do what? Like we were talking earlier with, the 4-stage rocket. And they're like, well, why would they even draw that up? That wasn't practical. That wasn't, or the lower orbit jet. That wasn't practical. Why would you even put money into it? Well, because they wanted to win a war, and they needed to win a war. So they, your gun and normal stuff wasn't working. So we needed to go further.
They were looking for anything that would give them an advantage.
That's right. And unfortunately, when you do, it's a counterbalance. On one hand, being open to everything is a good thing, because if they weren't, then they probably wouldn't have even put a dime into the V2. In modern day, we benefit from that research. However, so did the United States going to the moon, but that's beside the point.
Well, the angry mustache guy wanted to do that too. He wanted a base he wanted a moon base.
Yeah, he wanted a lot of things. But the problem with that is, if you even in your own life, you can notice that. If you have your fingers in too many pies, you have your fingers in none. Right?
Spread yourself too thin.
You're spread too thin.
Yep.
Right? Whereas if the person who's focused and like, okay, this is what I've got. This is what, okay, so I lose 10 tanks to their 1. Okay, that means for every battle, I have to put 20 tanks on the battlefield. If I know I'm going to lose 10, okay, well, instead of redesigning the tanks so that I'm just going to put 20 on the battlefield. Because that's the numbers. And it's really simplifying everything, but that's the long and the short of it. Is on one hand, it was really interesting how, they were open to everything and anything. The problem you find with that is then you're unfocused. And that can come back to bite you in the ass. But I mean, you could say the same thing on the other foot too, but that's why. So, speaking Wunder weapons, what other ones do we want to throw out there that YouTube isn't going to like?
Or if you want another one from me, Bismarck, you got to talk about the Bismarck.
Oh yes,
that and the Yamato, two biggest ships to ever be put in the water, and a mistake on both accounts. Bigger is not necessarily better.
No, the Yamato for the Yamato and the Musashi. I always butcher that, but yeah. The two major battleships of the Japanese, we look at it right now and go, mistake. Although, to be fair, the Bismarck and Tirpitz, in a world of coming online of what the British and the Americans were building, it's not really that far-fetched for Bismarck. The Yamamoto, the problem with the Japanese, and in a way, you can look at it. And I didn't really think about this either until I saw it on until one of the history people put it, and I had to stop and think about it, because we look at it right now and we go, well, it was stupid to do, and yes, it was stupid to do, but in a way, it was just different thinking. We're at a time where battleships are the beginning and end of everything. Your battleships said a lot about you, but not only that, but Japan's main, if we look at who Japan was going up against, the United States, right? Japan was never going to outproduce the United States.
No, absolutely not.
Right? So in their position, that battleship now makes more sense under that scope, because they could never go 1-for-1, battleship for battleship with the United States. What they could do was have two huge battleships that could fight 3 or 4 of your battleships. Problem is it went to air power, and then your battleship didn't matter anymore.
That's right. And it also comes down to who you pick on. The big mistake with Bismarck was it took out the hood. It took out the HMS hood.
Yes.
And Prince of Wales, which was a relatively new battleship in Britain, got away, but word went out that the Bismarck had destroyed the hood, and everyone wanted to take the ship down after that. It was like the British wanted to take it down, the Americans wanted to take it down, all the Allies were like, we're going to take this ship down. And that's exactly what they did. And they did it in the most unexpected way, because it's like, it's almost, if you love Star Wars, it's almost the exact same story. You've got this giant insurmountable battle, and they've got these little biplanes.
Yeah.
And these little biplanes, one of the stories I remember reading about was the torpedoes they had, obviously unguided. You dropped them and they went, but they were hitting the waves. It was something about the way they were immediately losing track. And what you had was you had this crazy Brit in the back seat of one of these swordfish bombers, and he's hanging out of the plane while the pilot's flying, and he's got his hand up. And what he's doing is he's telling him to wait for the perfect moment. He's looking down at the water, telling him to wait for the perfect moment. Machine gun fire. People were trying to blow him out of the sky. And this crazy ass Brit is hanging off the side of the plane, looking down at the water, and drops his arm. And that's when they let those torpedoes go.
Yeah.
That's insanity. I guarantee you, the Germans never, ever, ever expected. They're like, oh well, we'll fight the good fight, jolly good show, line up a little row, and we'll take out their battleships one after the other because we've got this big ass ship. And I guarantee you, our angry friend with the mustache had the exact same thought. Nothing's going to touch it. But then these little planes come in as low as they can possibly go down to the water. And they do exactly that. They damage it enough to where it's vulnerable.
Yeah, one shot out of a million. Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, they nailed the shot that nobody thought they'd like. When the Bismarck is being built, it's being built to go up against the Queen Elizabeths. It's going up against the King George V's. It's going, that's what they're thinking this ship is going to face. Although they're more hoping that it faces, the merchant marine, but that's besides the point. Scharnhorst is the same thing. They weren't thinking aircraft. And the torpedo bomber, that wasn't in the thought process at the time. And the Bismarck herself, gets into a gun battle, takes out Hood. Hood is the representation of the Royal Navy.
Big mistake.
It was the flagship. It was America's little darling on water, and you sunk it in tremendous fashion.
They split it in half, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it blew up.
It went boom. The last shell went completely through the ship.
Well, there's
ignited
on
the powder. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Actually, I'll say this. There's a really good breakdown of the battle, and I'll even plug the channel because they're bigger than me, and they're more. He knows way more about this than I ever will. Go to Drac on YouTube and look up his Drakenfell, and look up his breakdown of the Hood. Way more information than I could ever give, but it's really interesting. But yeah, the Hood was there. It symbolized the Royal Navy because it had been there for it wasn't the biggest ship, wasn't the baddest ship, but it was like that one person in your group there that everybody likes, right? It's not the biggest guy. He's not the biggest guy in the room. He's not the baddest man on the planet, but he's the one everybody likes, right? Well, that guy just got taken out. Well, now everybody's like, well, screw you.
That's right. And they chased Bismarck. They chased Bismarck and chased Bismarck because they wanted that retaliation. Take out our flagship, and look what we're going to do to your big new behemoth of a beast.
Yeah.
And they had the balls to do it. This took balls. I mean, you think about it. You're in a biplane. A group of biplanes essentially took out the the giant. It is
Yeah.
a David versus Goliath story, and the Allies did it. They did it, and they kicked ass and took names, and they were going to do it, and they knew they were going to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, when we catch it, when we finally get a hold of it, it's going down. No questions. No matter the cost, it's going down.
Yeah.
And they sent little bees to take it down. That's exactly what.
Yeah.
They did.
It's the same thing with Pearl in a lot of ways. Pearl was looked at as untouchable. Nobody's going to come here. We have all the battleships. Like this is the most secure port. Right. It's the most secure port. Well, he was thinking he was going to get attacked by planes. If you were going to attack it, you were going to come in with the Yamamoto, the Musashi, and a big fleet, right? The fleet you'd need to take Pearl is just insane.
And they weren't supposed to be able to use torpedoes. Torpedoes were not supposed to work because of the shallow. You couldn't use them in the shallows, but they were able to go beyond that and do that anyway. They were able to use their torpedoes anyway. They put these little block fins on them and said, "Oh, that's all you got to do." I mean, imagine you've got this weapon that costs thousands and thousands of dollars, and you're going to put $1 worth of wood on the ass end, and that's going to change everything.
Yeah. And then,
that was the ingenuity.
For equal opportunity picking on, we can go for the British and go Scapa Flow, anyone? Submarine gets in, sinks a ship, and goes home. Scapa Flow. The British fleet was supposed to be completely untouchable in Scapa Flow. Well, oops. And, it was crazy. But, I mean, each side had that mentality. There were certain things that were just not going to, aircraft carriers at the beginning of World War II were seen as not the big boys on the field. It was still the battleship. It's why the Iowas were created or thought of or dreamt of. But again, nowadays it's the aircraft carrier. Carrier is the flagship.
And that happened in World War II.
Yeah.
That was a big thing because we lost all our battleships. You sunk all our battleships. What do you got left? We've got aircraft carriers that left just a couple days before this happened. Find out how to use those to win a war. You tell me how I can use these to win a war. And they figured it out.
Yeah. Well, and just the attack on Pearl kind of opened everybody's eyes. Because it was done by aircraft carriers. It wasn't done by the battleship. This ship that nobody was paying attention to just basically sunk your fleet, dude. Right? Like, oh, well, maybe these ships are a little bit more useful than what we thought. So it's crazy. And then Wonder weapons were the same idea. They were okay, we're going to think out of the box. Traditionally, this is how this is done. Okay, well, what happens if we do it this way instead? And some of them worked, some of them didn't. Some of them didn't even make it to fruition. They and a lot of the stuff that we look at today as modern technology really started back then. Computers, missiles, rockets, all that stuff has its base even pre-World War II, some of it. It's just there was a war on, so things got more funding than they would have normally. One of the other wonderful things is the atomic bomb. That was a major project that shortened the war. But it's a wonder weapon. It just worked. right? That's
Right.
the difference. The difference between a low altitude bomber jet and the nuke worked. This one didn't come to fruition yet. So this one's crazy and this one's sane, right? Because one got done and one didn't. But
And
I mean,
look at the destructive power. I mean,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
you could bomb London all day long, and that's exactly what the Germans were doing. 2 bombs drop, and that's it. Japan's out of the war.
Yeah. And the world's put on notice. And then everybody wants that bomb. And then you have the Cold War. But, the wonder weapons of World War II, there are a lot of them. Some, and the Allies have them too. A lot of times we look at you say wonder weapons of World War II, and everybody's immediate brain goes to Germany or Japan because their wonder weapons were out of desperation. Ours were at some points out of desperation as well. I mean, we came up with really interesting, funny things, and some of them worked. The machine gun that could shoot around a corner, that was fun. Do you remember that one, Loki?
No, I don't.
Yeah, they put a barrel at a curve. They could shoot around the corner. It's for clearing buildings. But yeah, that was actually German. But yeah, they could. The barrel curved. Had a curve to it.
So you could just point it around the corner. You would think they would.
Yeah. That one was German. And to some degrees, they're still being made today. But yeah. There were, and these were things, there was a problem, and then there was the standard answer, and then there was the, well, what if? That's what a wonder weapon boils down to. It's a, well, what if? And some of them, like I said, worked, and some of them were somewhat rational, and some of them were like, you want to do what? Like we look at it today. Well, here's a problem. We can't get our bombs to land on American American ships because they're putting up too much flak. Our pilots can't get in and then get out. All right. Well, the solution to that is just fly the plane into the boat. Right? Our bombs are now getting onto the boats. We look at it as crazy. They looked at it as a desperate answer to a problem.
And they had men that felt it was their duty and honor to do something like that.
Yeah.
When you're raised in an environment where duty, honor, especially family honor, to refuse something like that would you go into this family honor. To refuse something like that doesn't just mean this is bad for you. It means that this is bad for your parents. This is bad for your wife. This is bad for your kids. This is bad for your family. So you didn't dishonor. You didn't bring dishonor, which means you did what you were told to do. Yeah. There was no questioning. There was no second guessing. You just went and did it. Whether you had to get drunk off sake and do it or whatever, you went and did it.
Yeah.
Some people might see that as absolutely insane today. Some people see it as an honorable thing that someone did for their family.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, not to the degree of the kamikaze mentality, but the British had some of that as well at the beginning of the war. After France fell, there were missions where boys were dropped. They weren't ever thinking they were coming back. They didn't know if that was a one-way trip. A lot of them drank the night before like it was the one-way trip. The SOE. Britain had to win. Britain was going to fight. They didn't know if they were coming home. There was no, well, we're going to go over, we're going to come back. There's, good possibility you're coming back. Not really. We're dropping you into enemy lines. You've got your machine gun, a couple of rounds, and we might have a plane to pull you out, but we're not 100% sure on that.
And speaking of planes, those RF pilots flying those Spitfires, they saved Britain. The radio operators, the radar operators, because they were using radar. They were using radar and radio at that point to save their country. That's what was giving the Spitfires information to get up in the air to do what they did. And a lot of those guys, their planes be choking, spitting oil, halfway to burning up in the air, and they'd still jump in those planes and fly them, whether they were repaired, ready or not.
Yeah. And not only that, but I mean, another one, I mean, you can't say it's exactly the same, but you go to the Americans, beginning of World War II for them, the Doolittle raid.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Those bomber pilots weren't guaranteed to get back. Did that stop them from getting in their bombers and taking off something that had never been done before? Taking a bomber off an aircraft carrier. That had never been done before. Most people expected the plane to just go off the end and into the lake, into the drink, right? That bomber's going to hit that water. It's going to go off the flight deck and right into the water. They did it anyway, right? We always look at it as a negative, but I always look at it like this. If, let's say, for some reason Japan had won the war, how would the kamikaze pilots be looked at?
That's a good question.
They'd be heroes.
Yep.
Right?
We took the words right out of my mouth.
We look at things with the modern lens, and we look back and we go, well, that was crazy. Yeah. But we did just as many crazy things. I mean, we took bombers off an aircraft carrier, and there was no guarantee that they were going to make it out alive. You might as well have just said that was a one-way mission. A lot of what the SOE did was crazy. And do you have a death wish? Why are you doing that? Do you have a death wish? No. There was a problem that needed solved. There was a job that had to be done, and they believed enough in that job, whether it's right or wrong is totally irrelevant, to do the job that was presented to them. And today we look at the SOE as brave men who did this and did that. Yeah, but if the war had flipped the other way, we'd be looking at a lot of those missions the same way we look at the missions on Germany's side or Japan's side, or we'd look at it different because they tried and it failed. We tried and it succeeded, which is always a different spin. But yeah, anyway, off my soapbox now.
So would you agree that the real true wonder weapons weren't made by man? They are man.
Yeah.
And that's a good and a bad thing, because you can
look
at
it's a double-edged sword. Yeah.
You can look at what Germany did, and it's absolutely sickening.
Mm-hmm.
The things that they did to human beings. And then you look at the ingenuity the bravery of the British. You look at the sleeping dragon that got woken up and just teared apart a superpower in America. You look at the Soviets who were 98% farmers. That was pretty much all they had was the farmers turning around building tanks and then pretty much launching them at Russia as they invaded, surviving the cold, surviving living in crumbled cities, still fighting, not giving up. The real wonder weapon was man.
Yeah, and what man is, I think the most dangerous weapon in any war is not the nuke, is not the gun. It is what a human who has a belief in something so strong that they're willing to go as far as they have to go to achieve that belief.
I think Mr. CCDV put it very well in the chat. Military tech is nice to have, but a fighting spirit is far more important.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of scary because now we've got all this tech. We've got all this technology. We've got new aircraft carriers. We've got new stealth fighters, bombers. We've got all kinds of toys to play with. But if you don't want to fight for it, you see people walk. I mean, that's pretty much what happened to Rome. I hate that the U.S. is constantly, it's the Roman Empire all over again. Or, look at the similarities between the U.S. and Rome, yada, 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 yada. But the problem with Rome was they had all this technology. They were doing brain surgery on people. They were doing brain surgery on people 1,500 years ago. They were performing brain surgery, and they crumbled, and they crumbled because people got lazy and people didn't want to fight. And you had basically the people in charge of their jurisdictions were buying mercenaries instead of training soldiers because it's cheaper just to pay a guy every month to be in your army than it is to train someone to be in your army.
Yeah. Well, I put it like, I think the scariest thought I have is if you think about it this way. We look at things when we talk today about, what if, when we throw those what ifs around. What if China or Russia and the United States had gone to war? Well, a lot of the major cop-outs is, the Americans had the better tanks, they had the better tech, they had all this better stuff. Okay, let's go back to World War II for a second, folks. If you put a Tiger versus the Allies tank, which tank was better? Engineering wise, which one was better? The German tank. It was the better tank on the battlefield. But it wasn't the one that won. And that's a lesson that we don't always learn, I think.
No, agreed. It is. It is very much a lesson we haven't learned. And we should have learned it. But so much of that generation is gone. And it's honestly not the same.
No.
I mean, you look at I don't want to go too much into what is going on today.
No, that usually gets us in more trouble.
We are in trouble. We all are headed towards a recession. Whether you are pro who's in the government, not pro, there is absolutely no denying that it's going to take us at the very least a couple of years to get out of the hole we're in right now, if not longer. And if this generation has to go through what the generation had to in the 20s and the 30s, there were people boiling cabbage and eating cabbage because that's all there was. They might have had money. They might have had enough money to go and get a hamburger. But guess what? nobody had any hamburger.
Yeah.
Right.
You can have all the money in the world, but if there's, and it's crazy because we sit there and we look around and we're quick to we're quick. I think the biggest problem I have looking around at everything is we're too comfortable.
Yes.
Right? There's no we're too. Everything will be status quo. Everything will work. Everything, look at, I mean, when you said, you hate when people look back and go, well, the Americans nowadays are just like the Romans. I've never understood why they go back that far. That's been my puzzle, is we don't have to go back that far.
Nope.
Hi, Britain. I mean, I don't mean to be that blunt, but maybe it's too soon. The British Empire.
Well, expansion, when you're expanding, and they people can call it whatever they want. Expansionism, they can call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
This is what you do to survive so that you're the biggest and the baddest. Because
Yeah.
the biggest and the baddest survives.
Yep.
And just like we were talking about just a minute ago, sometimes it's not about being the biggest and the baddest. It's about being the fastest. It's about being the easiest to fix. Go to Star Trek and listen to Scotty for 5 minutes. The more they overtake the plumbing, the easier it is to stop up the drain.
Yeah.
Simplicity. There is something to be said over speed and simplicity, and that's not something we have. We're a slumbering giant at the moment in America. That's a slumbering giant that's getting poked and told to go back to sleep. Go back to sleep. You don't need to be awake. Here, take this. We'll poke you with this, and you can go back to sleep and be sleepy. If you're not the biggest, baddest, most capable, someone's going to take that because someone wants that. And when you have a generation of people saying, no, 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 this is all bad, that doesn't mean that your enemy across the way, someone's telling them, no, 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 this is bad. You don't do this. How long has it been since we've been in an absolute slugfest with anyone? That's why you go back. That's why World War II is still so prevalent, because it was the last full-on slugfest anybody ever had. It was a fight to the finish, and whoever was left standing was going to be the biggest, baddest dog in the yard for a long time. That doesn't mean that's going to last forever.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, but I wouldn't even say the biggest and the baddest, because to me, I don't know, Loki, me and you agree on a lot of things, disagree on some things, but I'm pretty sure you've heard the old saying, when you walk into a bar, you don't look at the person who's yelling and screaming.
No.
You look at the guy who's sitting in the corner, not saying a word.
Drinking like nothing's going on.
That's right. That's the
right.
guy you worry about. You don't worry about the guy who's standing there with a beer in his hand saying, I can take every last one of you. That's not the guy you worry about. That's the guy you fluff off. The guy you worry about is the guy who's sitting in the corner sipping his drink.
Yep.
Right? That's the guy you pay attention to, not the guy running his mouth. And we forget that. And unfortunately, a lot of the times we end up being the guy running his mouth, especially in the West. And it's a human condition, there's no way you can take me. I go to the gym 5 times a week, and well, no, if that person's determined enough.
Oh yeah.
On your way.
Right? Right. If that person's determined enough, then, because here's the thing, the person who's determined is willing to go further.
It's not the knife in front of you that you have to worry about. It's the knife in your back. that you have
Yeah.
to worry about. It's the one you don't see coming. And when someone isn't following the same rule book as you are, like I've said this over and over again, listening to my grandfather, World War II, Army Ranger, coming up on that line of British soldiers that had been there for like a year. They'd been in this trench for a year. And he's like, we're gonna go around and hit him from behind. When you hear us start shooting, you come in and you rush him from the front. But that's not cricket, mate. No,
Yeah.
fuck cricket. This is war. We're gonna go around
Yeah.
behind him and we're gonna fire at him. And when they turn around and shoot at us, you rush them from the front. It's not the knife you see coming that's gonna be the end of you. It's the one you don't see. And when you have 20 million rules to follow and they don't, you're
Yeah.
at a severe disadvantage.
Yeah. Like right now I look at it and wonder weapons. We look at when we think wonder weapons, we think the V2 rocket. We think whether you believe in it or you don't, or you agree with the research or you don't agree with the research, we think about, you know, the Bell, or we think space flight, or we think but there were many wonder weapons of World War II on both sides. In some ways, you could say that radar was a wonder weapon. To me, a wonder weapon is anything where you're sitting in a room and somebody brings it up and, you know, it's usually laughed off. I mean, think about this. Think about being the first person in a room when the guy walks in, he says, okay, so I've come up with this device that will allow you to see aircraft before your eyes can see them, using things that you can't see. Yeah, okay, buddy. Lay down the whiskey and let's talk about the problem we have. These planes keep coming, right? If you put that mentality to a lot of the stuff that we did during World War II, one way or on either side, you can make an argument that some of it was just crazy. Sonar, there's another one. Yeah, we're going to use the sound wave, and we'll be able to detect a submarine. Yeah, sure you will. Yeah, right. Well, next, but it happened, and we were able to do it. But wonder weapons could be something as simple as we're going to fly across the channel, and we know that the Germans are using radar, so we're going to drop tinfoil to confuse the radar. Most people will sit there and go, "You're going to do what now?" Right? But
You're gonna wear a tinfoil hat and talk about aliens?
yeah, exactly. Right? The difference between I think a wonder weapon and a technological achievement is whether it works or not. Right? Really. Because we look at them differently. Like, well, that's a crazy idea. Well, there's also another saying that I remember hearing when I was growing up. That's so crazy, it might work.
That's right.
Right? That's so crazy, it just might work. And yeah, it's crazy. Unmanned aircraft. It's another. Yeah, that only happens in the movies. Go away. Well, we have them now. They're called drones.
Drones.
That's right.
Right?
Have you heard about the Valkyrie drones?
No.
Actually makes the F-35, which a lot of people have talked a lot of crap about. make kind of sense because you can remotely control 6 of them all through the heads-up display in your fighter helmet. You literally look and control what they do with your own damn helmet. That's absolutely insane. You know what? We're gonna have you sit in this plane, Canuck, and we're gonna put this helmet on you, and you're gonna be able to tell these planes that don't have anyone in them where to go and what to do and how to help you while you're flying just by your lonesome.
Yeah. You're going to be your own wingman.
That's
Like hell I
batshit
am.
crazy. That's
Yeah.
batshit crazy. But that's what we're doing today. Is
Yeah.
things that would absolutely positively seem batshit crazy in more ways than one, good and bad. And B Geek brought up Desert Storm. Absolutely, I believe that was a war. I would never ever say otherwise. My comments earlier about World War II are all about the world being on its heels of
Yeah.
who's basically going to be in charge of it when this is all said and done.
Yeah.
The amount of tech today is absolutely insurmountable involved with the military. But if you take that tech away, what do you have? You have men and women.
Yeah.
Those are
Right.
at the end of the day, those are your Wunder weapons. Those are whether it's their brains, whether it's their brawn, whether it's their courage, whether it's their heart, no matter what it is that they excel at, those are your weapons. Those are your
Yeah.
Wunder weapons.
Yeah. But I think we'll go around with final thoughts and then we'll wrap it up. It's been an interesting conversation. I always feel bad because I
Indeed.
don't get to the chat as much as I'd like to, but I just hope that people find these informative. They're not always the most thrilling conversations, but to me they're so important because they make you think. As long as they make you think, then they're worth doing.
Well, I think people come here just for that.
So
It does
Jeff,
make them
I'll let you
think.
start, and then we'll go to Loki, and then I'll wrap it up, and then we'll.
Well, this seems like a round table.
Yeah, I usually do. Yeah,
It's
I
a
usually,
little bit different.
yeah, a little bit different. Yeah.
Well,
So
I don't know if I really have much to add to all the conversation. You two just kind of ran with it, and it was just a fascinating discussion. And just want to thank you both for doing that. That was just great.
all right, and Loki.
Absolutely. I absolutely love this. When Jeff came to me with the idea, he was like, what would you like to talk about? I was like, German Wunder weapons of World War II. He's like, I don't know if we can do that. I don't know if we can get away with that. And I was like, wow.
Well, I said we'd have to be careful about it.
Yeah, be
Yeah,
careful.
watch this. Oh my beer.
I love talking.
Are we still on?
Are we still live?
Catch it while you can. YouTube loves me. But yeah, I mean, and again, I think this conversation probably went in ways people weren't expecting. Because normally when you see a stream or a video where it's Wonder Weapons, they'll sit here and they'll break down every single one, and 9 out of 10 it'll be, well, this was stupid, and if they say it was stupid, it's because it didn't work. And they don't go into the context. Every idea within context can somewhat make sense. If you stop and go, well, why did they do that? Like I pointed out earlier, today we look at the kamikazes as crazy and what the hell. We did some of the same stuff. Ours just worked and we won. Is the difference to a lot of degree. But we don't look at it like that. And I think we need to. Because at the end of the day, the wonder weapon that continues to evolve and continues to grow is us. You can have all the guns, you can have all the tanks, you can have all the battleships, you can have all the fancy gadgets and gizmos. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the person to use all of the fancy gizmos and all the fancy things, and not only that, but they don't have the same will that the other guy has.
Yeah, it's like a modern movie. You can have
Yeah.
all the great special effects in the world if you don't have the acting, if you don't have the story, the directing, the editing, the music.
Well, I can
Yeah.
I can put it this way, and I think Loki will laugh at this comparison, but because he's done a couple of shows on this. But look at YouTube. You can create a channel. Everyone can. You can release a video every day at 8 o'clock on time every day, and your channel may not go anywhere. Meanwhile, the guy next to you releases a video once a month, and his channel soars because he puts in the work.
That's right.
Puts in the drive. He has the drive to succeed, and it doesn't matter how many times somebody tells him he can't, he's going to do it. He may never. He may hit 200, and that's as high as he goes. But to him, that 200 might as well be 200K. Because he has the drive for it to work. And one day it will.
And we were talking about drones and all that stuff earlier. The true next evolutionary leap as far as fighting goes will be taking all that away and not needing a single person.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it's anybody's fucking game.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody ever watch Terminator? The first one and the second one, not those ones that came after, but the first and the second one. Yeah. If you remove, it's like, that's the scariest thought that we're moving towards. Drones, unarmed fighter craft, unarmed tanks, unmanned tanks, unmanned drones, unmanned. And the reason is because it's like a video game, right? There's no cost, right? If you have a side where there's no real human damage, there's no body bags coming back, for instance, there's no funerals, and it cheapens war, in my opinion. Cheapens it. We lose something there. Anytime you take humanity out of the question, you lose something. Because then it's just, my toaster got blown up.
Yep.
It was a $500,000 toaster, but my toaster got blown up. We'll go buy a new one. It takes something away from it. But yeah, that's my thoughts on that. But yeah, so Wonder Weapon, I think the scariest and most interesting Wonder Weapon that was ever designed was us. Because at the end of the day, we're the most scariest thing on this planet, and we can be at sometimes the best thing on this planet, and sometimes at the same time, which is really weird.
Paradoxal.
Yes. And we can be our own worst enemy.
Definitely.
Sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, I'm going to thank everyone in chat. I hope you found this at least interesting. And I want to thank everyone for showing up on Saturday. It meant a lot to me. And I also want to thank you on behalf of Mrs. Doom for everyone who showed up on Saturday. I greatly appreciate that. and or thought of Doom that day, know it's appreciated. Also, I want to quickly allow everybody, although I think everybody knows this, but anyway, if you don't know who Loki is, which I'd be shocked if you didn't, but if you don't, he does a little show, so I'm told, every day, Monday to Friday at 8 o'clock in the morning. And usually he's raising hell about something. And he has split personality from once in a while. You know, his other personalities come out, and it's quite entertaining. You know, once in a while he lets them out.
Every once in a while.
Yeah. And his link to his channel is in the description. So do, if you're not subscribed. Now, I can't imagine anybody not being, but if they're not, do take a look. And you know, Loki has done a lot. The intros you see at the beginning, he made those for me. I greatly appreciate that. The intro for Doom on Saturday was done by Loki, and I think Loki was given 5-minute notice on that one. Something like that. You know,
It wasn't that
do you
bad.
have music? Do you have music? It went from music to Loki's just going to do the intro. You know,
Thankfully, that was before your computer went out.
Yeah,
yes.
well, it was on its way. It was on its way.
Yeah.
It was. I was
Yeah.
having issues. I had issues that day, and then of course yesterday. So,
And I'm gonna let Loki comment on this one.
uh-huh. Mhm.
But with that, I'm going to thank our guests. Thank you, Loki. It's always awesome to have
Thank
you
you.
on.
Thank you for having me. Seriously, thank you guys for having me
Well,
on.
we'll have
I
you
never
back.
talk about this stuff.
Yeah,
I'd love to
definitely.
come back.
And you know, you got to let Peter Whalen know that he's going to have a part soon. But
Okay, I will. I will let him know. He'll be excited. He hasn't gotten to have any.
Yeah, he
spotty
hasn't
dick
had
lately.
he hasn't a script in a little while. But with that, I will say thank Jeff. Do you want to promote your Sunday show? You don't do that enough.
Well, okay. Question of Treks. If you like Star Trek and you like quiz shows, this is the show for you. We have a lot of fun. You can be on the as a contestant. We'd love to have you there. So just come to the chat on Sundays. We're at 4:30 Eastern time, 4:30 p.m. Eastern time, 3:30 Central.
Awesome. All right, and with that, I will say thank you and good night.